Hello, everyone. Welcome to the GLORIO Chat, the best anime podcast on the internet. My apologies to everyone out there that we are recording this episode a week late. This is going to be the final thoughts on the spring 2023 season. And unfortunately, I was traveling during the last Sulata Sunday and most of this past week. So we did not get a chance to give our final thoughts yet. But I'm putting this on tape. We are going to try to do back-to-back weeks for the podcast to catch up. So we're going to get this one out, and next week we're going to do our first looks for the summer season. Which
don't worry, folks. We'll have your hard-hitting takes on summer 2023.
Spoilers.
If you think these podcasts run too long, then we have a treat for you.
Spoilers. It's looking a little grim, but of course you can always go check out our written posts at the glorioblog.com in the meantime. But we will be getting to the new shows, we promise. But we got to talk about the spring shows, and before we do that, I'll introduce everybody. I'm Jel. We're joined by Iro.
I'm still here. I'm not dead yet.
Still with us. We're joined by G.
I gotta say, the quotient of crazy kids making it in this messed up world is off the charts this season.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. That is one way to look at it.
I mean, by this season, you mean last season, right?
Fine, last season.
The season that we're presently going to be talking about today.
Yes. In July. Yes, we are here to talk about spring 2023 in the middle of July.
Yeah. And we're also joined by Zig.
The obligatory option when nobody else feels like showing up.
We value your opinions greatly, Zig, and your sacrifice for toughing out the heat and staying up late from being.
No, Zig, you gotta change your branding. You should call yourself the option select. We don't always know if the overhead is going to come after the mix-up, but there's always the chance.
Yeah, you guys have been playing way too much Street Fighter these days, but
you haven't been playing enough Street Fighter.
Yeah. Well, let's keep it on anime here, and talk about these shows. Which I feel like this season we got a lot of good shows that most of them struggle to hold themselves together to the finish line.
But there was kind of a glass ceiling that nobody really smashed through, right?
There's one show on this list.
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay, yeah.
I think we
I'll get to that later.
Mostly got there to varying degrees, but it was a little shaky toward the end on a lot of these. But
I think my general feeling on the season as a whole, barring some of the really egregious offenders here, is that I think, if I'm being honest, I don't think any show I think all but one show on this list arguably finishes weaker than it started, but I think a lot of them, it's a rough landing, but I think a lot of them do manage to land the plane in the end. It's just
and also I would say that the slate of shows we're going to talk about represent an interesting and varied selection of different types and styles and subjects, right? And that's good. I would rather have a lot of interesting, messy shows than competent, boring ones for the most part.
For sure.
I think it's a net positive overall. It's just, man, we barely made it on some of these. So let's get into specifics, though. And
sure, kick us off.
We'll start with my love story with Yamada-kun at level 999. We had one final twist in the arc here, which I started to mention before, but Yamada's classmate, who of course is also in love with him, kind of makes her move in this final stretch. She's the serious glasses girl which is legally distinct from the shy glasses girl, I have to point out. Yes, serious glasses girl is just a lady who is a lady of few words, basically. But she makes her move, and it's kind of nice that they never play this as the big threat to the main relationship or whatever. Everybody knows what's going on. Even she knows what's going on. She just kind of wants to get it off her chest, I guess. And she has her big confession to Yamada, and he of course has to turn her down. And that's our one twist. um, toward the end, because Akane, the main girl, she recovers from the dreaded anime cold, and with her head clear, she works out her feelings, is like, figures out that she does like Yamada, and the two of them work it out, and they end up together in the end. Yay, we made it.
Mhm.
And it's very sweet. It's fine. I think I'm actually am disappointed that they never really do anything with the video game stuff again.
I was going to say,
Wow.
does anybody reach level 999?
Like possibly the last
They're
almost the entire second half, they completely abandoned the video game hook, which again, like, a lot of these types of shows, I might say good riddance, but with this show in particular, I felt like that was the one unique thing they had going for them, and that they were using it like in a good way. And without that, just kind of becomes a basic romantic comedy love story thing, and it's nice, but it's just, I felt like the unique personality it had to it was like gone at that point. So
Right. Like the thing I would say is that I think that speaks to like the way that anime and manga is made and marketed these days, in that they, like, the author kind of used the video game stuff as a Trojan horse to get his romantic comedy made. I think that is, and I can't speak for the author obviously, but that's very much to me what this comes off as. Hearing you say that is, we had to put in another world in a video game in the title for this to even get a second look, but we ditched that shit as soon as we could.
yeah, and again, like, normally I would say great, good riddance, but like, I do feel like they made the effort to find ways to incorporate that into the story and make it make sense and kind of give it a unique flavor. And just weird that they just totally ditched it. And maybe you're right, Zig. Maybe that was the real reason, or maybe that's just the way the final episode's paced out. I don't know. Maybe they're going to dive back into the game now that they're together. But G, were you going to say something?
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, that is an interesting creative choice, I guess, because as you say, right, like, done poorly, right, like, that sort of like add-on can feel like clunky and extraneous, but I think done well, especially if you're working in a very like familiar like archetype of narrative like a rom-com, that stuff can almost work as a seasoning, right? Like, I would say that like a lot of, I am not in as deep on the rom-com stuff as you are, Jel, but like the ones I have watched and enjoyed, it feels like there's always like a thing, right? A spice, a seasoning, some sort of like gimmick on top of it that doesn't overwhelm the story, but kind of helps like serve as a catalyst for interesting things to happen.
Right.
And when you get rid of that, then I guess the bones of your rom-com better be really, really strong, right?
Yeah, and I mean, to be fair, they're good. Like, I enjoyed it. I didn't really have any problem with it. It was just like, I don't know, like, I probably won't remember this show, 6 months from now, because it's just like, I watch a lot of these, and some of them are pretty good, and this is another pretty good one, I guess. So, I hope that's not coming off as too negative. Like, if you are into this genre, like I am, it's like it is actually a really good example. Like, I don't have
for fans of
it.
the genre.
But yeah, I feel like I'm gonna slap it with a for fans of the genre, right? No,
It's
7.2 for fans of the genre.
It sounds a lot better than a for the fans of the genre.
I mean, like, anybody could watch this and enjoy it. It's just like, I don't know if it's going to blow anybody away, right? And I feel like there was maybe a little bit of potential left on the table at the end of the day, which is unfortunate. But overall, it's a nice story. I like all the characters. Everybody gets a happy ending, except the Glasses Girl. Sorry, Glasses Girl. I did actually feel bad for her. And yeah, it was a fun show. I guess in a similar vein, Skip and Loafer. That if I had to grade the two, I would still probably grade Skip and Loafer higher, because I do think, even though not a lot happens in the show, of course, like, I think the characters and their relationships are a lot more unique, and perhaps even more endearing. It's just a really nice show to watch. And they do attempt to throw in their little bit of drama at the end because, if you guys recall, the main guy, Shima, was the child actor, and he had
some kind of hidden darkness inside.
Yeah, so he has this other girl that he worked with that got canceled because they were at a party where they got caught drinking when they were like in 6th grade.
Right, I remember you talking about this.
And she's been holding it over his head ever since then, for the past however many years. And
is there a scene? Is there a scene where he just goes up to her and goes, "Canceling isn't real"?
No, unfortunately.
But
yeah. So he of course has not acted since the incident because he just can't bring himself to do it anymore. But he finally gets talked into acting into the school play, which is legally not The Sound of Music. And he is not playing the Nazi kid that falls in love with the oldest daughter. That's one of the funny things this show has done, where they've thrown in like old like movies and stuff, but they're like can't say the actual name. Like they went to see Gone with the Wind, and they could not say Gone with the Wind. So this play is not Sound of Music, totally not Sound of Music. And
of course not.
The canceled girl gets word of this, and she decides to show up to the school festival where they're doing the play. Honestly, I don't know what her plan was, other than to just make everybody uncomfortable. But she
take him down a peg.
She shows up, and she's mean to Shima's very nice mother, which made me hate her a lot. And he finally just. I'm like, somebody's got to take this girl down. And he's very politely tells her that, he deserves to be happy, and so does she. And, they need to move on with their lives and everything is fixed. But, and, it's an ongoing story. So they kind of leave it open for more adventures to come. And that's kind of it. I hope I'm not sounding too dismissive, but I mean, it's just like nothing kind of really happens. It just
I get it, right? Like these types of shows, it's like describing them in a vacuum is going to make them sound kind of dull, right? It's more about like the delivery of these moments by the characters, right? And your investment, your emotional investment in them. So describing it to 3 people who have not seen the show or have not finished it or what have you,
it actually does feel like it actually does feel like a big deal when he comes to that moment of like, I deserve to be happy. Like we can move on. And
no, totally. I mean, like you're describing that, and I'm thinking of like, like the Ishigami sports arc of Kaguya, right? Where like that girl from his middle school shows up to
it is
the school festival.
It is not unlike that. Yes, it's in that neighborhood. So it's good. And I mean, this is definitely at the top of the list of like nice people being nice to each other shows. So again, if you're a fan of that genre, this is like as good as it's gonna get. So I very much enjoyed it. But so again, I think that was a good point in that this is a tough sell in an audio format here, but if anything we've said on this show sounded good, go check it out. I do think it delivers for the most part. So
the only reason I didn't watch it anymore of it is
you're watching like 10 other things,
right? It's so I'm sure this is perfectly nice. It sounds lovely. The first episode was very enjoyable, and I don't have time for this.
Yep. All right. Let's move along and let you guys talk about Vinland Saga.
All right,
let you talk about Vinland Saga.
This is going to be the first.
I've literally been on podcasts and been like, don't we need to talk about Vinland Saga? And was told, well, G does it so well that we'll just wait for him. And then I'm like, all right.
Well, this time it is finally like completely
over.
Yeah,
it is time to close the book. And also, Iro, I'm going to need you to be on this one because I think we do need to talk about this show and also just where it stands in its peculiar place
Now
as
that
an
I've read
adaptation
the
of a
manga,
continuing story.
yeah.
But let's focus on the anime, right? I think
Where did we leave
so.
off? I don't think I was on the last one where we talked about this.
I think just as a quick recap,
It probably would have been like the last like 2 or 3 episodes, I think.
Yes, so I think with Vinland Saga, we leave off on Thorfinn and Einar finally confronting King Canute, as he is known as Canute the Great, the most legendary of the Danish kings, blah, blah, blah.
Uh-huh.
And basically, because King Canute is here to basically seize the lands of violently seize the lands of a vassal. And Thorfinn, a slave on this farm, is desperate to try to stop the violence before it escalates even further. Mm-hmm. And essentially, yes, confronts King Canute, uses his old, relationship with Canute to get an in, and sort of like appeal to him through diplomacy, through moralizing that, look, man, like,
does it have to be this way?
Right, essentially, yes. Does it have to be this way? Like, does it always have to devolve into senseless violence? And we get a great moment. We get a great, fantastic portrayal of the story, the apocryphal tale of Canute and the Tides, which, for those who are not familiar,
I was going to. I was just going to say, I was wondering when they would get to that, because
yes,
it is probably the most famous thing the layman knows about Canute.
Right.
Yeah.
This was the thing where I was like, even I know about this.
Yes. Fantastic insight into Canute's, both insight into the real king, and here in Vinland Saga, insight into the character that is being portrayed, of Canute basically holds his hand out to the ocean waves and commands them to stop by his authority as king. And obviously the tides do not stop. And Canute makes the point that, he is also but, merely a mortal man. And as a mortal man, he cannot make the world a better place by himself. And he essentially communicates his ideology to Thorfinn and Einar, that he will not stop pillaging and slaughtering, that he will not stop waging war on the world to create his vision of that ideal world. His belief that it is only by threat of violence and the might of his army that he has any hope to enforce a better world, one in which he can drag his subjects and enemies alike into the light, kicking and screaming. And makes it very clear to Thorfinn, the only way you will stop me is if you commit to violence yourself and overcome me with greater violence than my own. And this puts the newly pacifist Thorfinn in a pretty difficult spot, of course. And it's sort of in this moment where all of Thorfinn's ideals and thoughts and experiences coalesce finally into concrete action. And Thorfinn lays out his grand declaration to Canute that if Canute will not stop warring against the world, Thorfinn will simply run away. He will run away. He will run to the edge of the world. He will literally create his own country with blackjack and hookers, but no war and slavery. The idea being that Thorfinn has accepted that if he is to be a pacifist, if he is to truly embrace this ideology, then he can't stop Canute. And that he will have to accept that, and that instead he will need to go elsewhere and take like-minded people with him to a land where hopefully he can spread his ideology. And the absurdity of this statement, especially in the context of medieval masculinity and morality, leave Canute completely, utterly dumbfounded. But the important thing it does, though, is what Thorfinn does with this statement is implant in Canute the kernel of the question, is there another way to do this? Is there, in fact, a different approach to creating his ideal world? And, long story short, Canute lets Thorfinn and Einar go, seeing as they basically said, yeah, no, we're just simply not going to fight you. And it all wraps up, I wouldn't say idyllically, but it does roughly line up with the history where Canute decides to disband his armies, which is a real thing that happens around this time period, which the anime obviously wants to portray as like, Thorfinn's like morality finally reached Canute's. I think in the real world, it's because Canute realized that paying professional armies was getting expensive. And
I mean, there's a reason that standing armies were not really a thing up until the 15th century or so.
Yes. But the idea is that, through Thorfinn's, moralizing through his efforts, he has not stopped Canute's warpath. He has not really stopped his ambitions for the world, but at least in this one place, at this one farm, he manages to stop the killing. And in some regards, that is... maybe that's all we can really hope for, right? Is, if we cannot make a better world, then we can at least make it a slightly less worse one for the ones around us. And that sort of wraps up the Farmland Saga storyline. Obviously there is some wrap up where obviously Thorfinn and Einar leave with Leif Erikson. They're going to finally return home. But yeah, they really do an amazing job of wrapping up what is probably the strongest arc of Vinland Saga in a really satisfying way. I have to give a lot of credit to Mappa for the work they've done with this adaptation. This is all the penultimate episode, by the way. This is the second to last episode. This isn't even the last episode.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but yeah,
it's really they do a great job of like wrapping up the story in a way that feels very satisfying. And
so, what are they using that last episode for?
For coming full circle, and this is why I actually really like this creative decision. The last episode of Vinland Saga the anime is about Thorfinn returning home. And this episode is all about Thorfinn kind of coming to terms with all of the lessons he has learned over his whole life,
Because he left home when he was like 6 years old or something to chase his father's killer, and then spent a decade killing people, and then several years as a slave. So he has not been back to Iceland.
Yes, he has literally not been a normal human, like in over a decade. It's the last episode kind of smartly uses the time it has to sort of like interrogate what I'd say are like the three like great messages that Thorfinn was taught as a child. There is the first from his father, who told him 15 years ago that no man is born with enemies. There is the story told to him by family friend Leif Erikson about a land far to the west, untouched by war and slavery, known as Vinland. And the final message from his final father of sorts, Askeladd the mercenary, the man he swore to kill, who with his own dying breath asks Thorfinn, "What are you going to do for the rest of your life now that I'm dead? Like, this is what you built your entire life for, and now here I am bleeding out in front of you. So, what's next?" And this last episode is kind of about interrogating all three of those. Like, he returns home, but he feels like a foreigner, an outsider, and he is treated as such. People, childhood friends and neighbors don't recognize him. They struggle to remember if there really was a kid named Thorfinn who lived in this village like 18 years ago.
I mean, this is also the kind of time period where a lot of people died very suddenly without much explanation, right?
Yeah, and totally, right? So it's like, and also there's the era before, like standardized identification, right? So everybody's like, I think there was a Thorfinn who used to live here, but okay, if you are, prove it, right? Like, who am I? And Thorfinn's like, shit, dude, I haven't thought about these people in like 18 years. I have no clue.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in my life from 18 years ago I'm not going to remember, and that's in my adult life, right? Yeah.
And it's overall it's a bit of a lighter episode. It's there's we meet Thorfinn's painfully hot older sister again. He reunites with his mother. It's the classic, like, of course, the person who recognizes him, is his mother, who's like, I know those eyes anywhere, sort of thing. And it's very emotionally fulfilling. It doesn't quite hit with the same, like, dramatic gravitas as the penultimate episode, but it's kind of fine because, like, they mostly wrap up the primary drama in that penultimate episode.
And
so this final episode is
epilogue, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
just to be clear, this is not the end of Vinland Saga. Right?
No.
This is just the end of the arc.
Yes, and the anime for now. And
yeah, because, like, the way you're, like, I obviously, the reason I asked is that it sounds like it could be the end. It sounds like kind of that the characters have come full circle. So I'm kind of interested to know where they're going to go forward from here.
I think in a lot of ways this could be the end of the anime, because, like, the episode basically concludes with, like, Thorfinn coming to terms with who he has become, the man he has become over the last, like, nearly 2 decades of his life, right? He has gleefully doled out tragedy with his blade, and he has been on the receiving end while bound in chains, right? Like, his whole life has filled him with a clarity of purpose that could only be gained through the unique combination of experiences he has gone through. He knows in his heart that the world as it is cannot be, that if this is the world that mankind is doomed to inherit, then he must make real his own ideals with his own 2 hands. And he will do so by founding, the Vinland colony in the New World. And it is with that conviction, it is with that clarity of purpose that he walks into the sunrise. He walks into the sunrise, and, the anime ends just like that. And it's man, I mean, Vinland Saga, like, I know, we've been talking about it every week like this, but it really is, like, one of the most compelling, like, stories of redemption that I feel like I've had the pleasure to experience. I've talked about this multiple times, which is, like, how rare it is, like, to have an anime or any story really, but especially an anime in 2023 say, we are going to spend 48 episodes, like, gradually exploring the interiority of a single person across decades of their life, and, like, the slow journey to self-actualization that will take place. Like, this is not to say that shorter anime don't also have compelling character arcs or character development, but, like, to have the bravery to commit that much runtime to really exploring it just feels really special.
Yeah.
It must be nice when a series has the time to develop all of its themes and characters, but we'll get into that later.
I think it's particularly gratifying because I think that we haven't had very many memorable historical anime in recent years, or at least not many that have stuck broadly to non-fantastical settings. And so I'm always pleased when something comes along that can tell human drama without too much fantasy intruding into the picture, so to speak.
Right. Barring giant Vikings throwing logs and stuff.
Yeah,
which is just sort of like, this is what the stories say. We all know that's not true technically, but it fits with the milieu, right?
Yeah.
So, you guys don't think there's going to be more anime?
I hope not. God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. As
Do you
Eros,
want there to be more anime?
As Eros sort of alludes to there, what season 2 of Vinland Saga covered is the best Vinland Saga has to offer. It is the best Vinland Saga ever was, and will be.
Is
But
this a,
does
like
it become bad, or does it just become?
I was gonna
less
say,
good?
is this a Promised Neverland situation?
I would not go as far as Promised Neverland.
Not that far, but like the same ballpark of just like it gets real. The arc that follows the anime lasts a very long time and is concerned with things I was not interested in hearing about. Because it's chiefly about Thorfinn's past and his legacy as a Viking and what all those Vikings are up to over there, killing and having succession crises and stuff. And I'm just not that interested in that stuff compared to Thorfinn's journey to create Vinland.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they've moved past all that, right? Like, why would you go back?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
That's how I felt.
Yeah,
reading the manga.
I get, this is the thing, right? Like, I almost don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the manga.
Right.
Because we're here to
I was
talk about the
just
anime.
about to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I will never stop trumpeting this anime's merits. Like, I mean, I'm gonna be real with the season ahead looking this week. Guys, it might be time for you all to catch up on Vinland Saga, all 48 episodes of
Yeah,
it.
it's looking like that, honestly.
But no, it's Iro's not wrong that, like, I think there's a world in which what a hypothetical season 3 explores could be done well, but it would never even the like really well adapted version of it would not match the heights of what season 2 does. Like, it's because season 2 is part and parcel of season 1. Like the two together create the story of Thorfinn becoming who he is. I mean, the manga literally calls this span of time that are covered in season 1 and season 2 the prologue. It's called the prologue. Like, it is a self-contained story about how Thorfinn becomes the man who will found Vinland, And so it's like, after that, it's like, yeah, I mean, I guess it is kind of a Promised Neverland situation of like, what do you do after you do the big thing that you...
The thing, yeah.
You tent-poled your entire narrative on.
Right.
And the answer is you muddle around for a bit in the way that many serial manga do. So,
well,
I see that they were aiming for a Norse saga in length as well as content.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thankfully, we don't judge anime on the merits of their source material, right? It's its own standalone thing that it sounds like it's very good. And yeah, I keep threatening to hit the backlog next season, so maybe that'll be the first thing that goes on there. I have some other ideas kicking around for backlog too, but we'll save that for next time. All right. Do you guys one more question? Do you think that this is going to be anime of the year contender?
I think
for you personally.
Yeah. I think, like, Vinland Saga is not a show I fought particularly hard for when it first came around, because I knew the really good shit was going to come in season 2. And now that it's here, and now that they've nailed it as well as they did, no, I think so. I mean, unfortunately, by default, Vinland Saga is probably the best adaptation of, if not the whole year, then at least the season. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I'm going to try to check it out. I guess my concern with has always been, like, the first half of it does not sound very interesting to me, but I also understand that it has to happen for the second half.
It's one of those situations, and
so that's kind of what's interesting to me. But
yeah,
well, maybe we'll see.
Like Arrow, maybe you could speak to that. Like, I wouldn't call season 1 of Vinland Saga bad. It is just simply,
it's got a different focus. I did enjoy the sort of, like, because it's not all just murder and violence. Like, there's a certain amount of Ashlot is scheming. It's a wartime story, and so there's politicking and scheming and trying to get one up on each other in like those sorts of forms.
Right.
While Thorfinn is trying to do his thing. Like, I would say season 1's almost more about Askeladd's goals than Thorfinn's. Because Thorfinn's just, I want to kill this guy! And Askeladd's just, okay, go sit over there while the big boys, discuss the state of the Danish invasion of England.
Yeah, I guess that's a good way of putting it, right? Is that, like, season 1 is much more... I mean, yes, okay, there's obviously the, like, much vaunted Viking violence in there, but season 1 is definitely more, like, higher-level politics-minded. It is not as personal of a story. Like, there is not a character in season 1 that you necessarily attach to in the way you do in season 2, but I think there's still interesting stuff to be seen there about, like, like, the nature of kingship and, like, how politicking is done, in a monarchist society and that sort of thing.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll see if I get to it next season, but we can move on for now. So let's talk about Oshi no Ko, which I will note is not actually over. Season 2 was announced.
Oh, did they actually announce it? I didn't.
Yeah, so it is officially happening.
Sure.
They haven't announced a date, I don't think, but it is happening. So I mostly want to talk about it because I don't know how you're feeling, G. I don't know if I'm going to watch season 2.
Wow. Really?
That turned off by the end of season 1, huh?
Well... Okay, so
turn off by the show with the number 1 anime OP of all time.
Okay,
it's a good song. Shut up.
The OP still slaps.
As according to the charts.
Yeah, it's a good song.
People are really love that song, but and it's good. So I don't really have anything particularly like I didn't hate the final arc. The final arc is basically like the show's going to be continuing, right?
Yes.
So there's not really any closure or anything. They basically just go into another arc focused on the Bikomachi version 2.0, which is the old idol group that they're resurrecting with Ai's daughter and Kana,
Ruby,
the childhood actress.
Yeah. So they finished all the Terrace House stuff.
Yeah. So the last like 3 or so episodes are mainly like focus back on Ruby again and her storyline of reviving.
And it's not even really focused on Ruby, it's more focused on Kana, right?
Right, which is... I mean, here's the thing. Like, this is where, I've said this multiple times every time we talk about Oshi no Ko, but, like, damn, this show's a lot better when Aqua is not the focus of the plot line, huh? Because,
yeah, go ahead.
No. You go first.
Yeah, you are correct. So in that respect, I appreciated having an arc that had very little to do with Aqua. I will say, a lot of people out here saying Kana is the best character and everything. I really hate that it appears her only motivating factor is her crush on Aqua.
Yeah, so Kana is a weird character because I actually really... this is not that weird of a take.
Is she the one who he saved from killing herself?
No. Kana is the child actress that.
Okay.
The one that they saved from she's also in love with him, but that's
okay.
No, don't worry. They're introducing a love triangle in the last episode. So
right.
Yeah.
We have that to look forward to. But no, I really like Kana is the child actress who like holds herself up to like a crushing standard, who has like been a like struggling like celebrity of middling success at best throughout her career. Classic child actress syndrome of people perceive that she peaked early and has been mucking about since. And the thing that makes Kana interesting, right, is like her passion for acting never went away even after like the spotlight faded. And sort of how does a creative square away that like people think they've peaked, right?
Right.
That
like
they
care about this as much or even more than you ever did, but nobody else
does.
Yeah.
this is the thing I struggle with, because I really like Kana as a character. I look at her and, I mean, surprise, surprise, I find her very relatable. Like, you know, the idea that, like, the passion you put into something, a creative endeavor, very rarely, like, linearly scales with reception,
your commercial, financial success and reception, right?
You
like,
know, and they sort of explore this in multiple ways with Kana's character, right? Like, we find out that she is in fact a fantastic singer, right? That, like, of the well, I mean, in universe, I mean, her singing's fine, whatever, but in universe, like, compared to
grading on a curve to the other two in the idol group, she is the best singer.
She is the best
far.
singer, right? Like, when they were trying to decide who should be the center of their, like, idol formation, right? And Kana's like, oh yeah, I had like a middling singing career. It was super cringe. Everybody hated it. I did this song about bell peppers that was really popular on children's television. And, you know, she's doing the thing a lot of artists do of, like, oh yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal, right? And then, you know, Memcho, the YouTuber that they recruit to be to their idol group, and Ruby watch some of, you know, Kana's music videos, and they're like, oh shit, this girl really knows how to sing. Wait, she's like a real deal professional, unlike us, you know? But, like, she didn't chart, you know? The reviews were poor, right? So
Right.
when you tie your sense of self-worth to your creative output, not just your creative output, but also how people respond to your creative output, it creates this really dark, you know, what's the word? Like, I don't know, vicious cycle, I guess, right? Of, like, you commit harder and harder to, like, new creative projects and expect greater and greater things out of them, which, again, just does not realistically line up to how, you know, entertainment works as an industry. And I like all that stuff, but then, as you just alluded to, Jill, the thing that really fucking sucks about Kana's character is that her crush on Aqua is the linchpin that addresses all of her problems.
Yeah.
And it's a really frustrating way to address this character.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate, because it does feel like they're almost deliberately showing, like, that's the only thing that gets her fired up. Like,
yeah,
everything else, because, like, you know, because she's been in the game so long, you know, she has a pretty cynical attitude toward her job, and, you know, somewhere in there's, I think they hint that she still has some of her creative passion, but a lot of the time she's approaching it as, you know, this is a job, and this is our, you know, I'm going to calculate the best way for us to be successful, and, you know, we'll see what happens. But, and you know, they have to talk her into being into the idol group. They have to talk her into being the center of the group. Like, she has no motivation until, you know, the thought of Aqua comes into her head, and that's the only time she gets fired up over anything.
And I think it truly fucking sucks. Like, so, honestly, like,
is this the kind of show that is, like, going to interrogate that as, like, an unhealthy relationship dynamic and an unhealthy work ethic dynamic?
Dude, I don't even fucking know.
Or is it just like almost a joke that she doesn't care unless Aquamarine's in the room?
No, I don't think they're necessarily going that route. What we are set up with at the very end, the show with the other girl, Akane, that tried to kill herself, that show ended with Aqua pretending to be her boyfriend for the sake of publicity, and but of course she really likes him, like, for real. But she's also like, oh yeah, well, let's pretend to be boyfriend.
My eyes are already glazing.
And so they kind of put her on.
They haven't even glazed over yet. Wait till you find out how this episode wraps up.
Yeah, so they kind of put her on the bench for the last couple episodes while we were focused on the idol stuff, right? And then at the very end, we leave off with a new job offer for a live 2.5D stage performance.
It's a stage play. It's one of those Japanese
stage plays
of,
like, some popular shonen anime, right?
Right.
And
it's literally, like, not Demon Slayer.
Yeah, it's like, it's like off-brand, great value
stage play stuff.
Stage play, yeah. And of course, all three of our love triangle get cast in this.
And not only that, but in the work itself, they are a love triangle.
Yes. And this is, of course, and they show the two girls kind of in their own inner monologue going off in a huff on how much they hate each other because they're jealous. They're thinking that Aqua likes the other one. And, they're going to fight it out in this stage play, which we'll see in season 2, I guess.
Sounds amazing.
I'm just like,
it is like it is like the worst possible way to end your last episode if you want to hype people up to keep watching.
Do you see, G, why I'm like, do I want to continue
No,
going?
I completely understand. I the thing I struggle with, right, is like I'm in the same camp as you, Jill. It's just like there are just things that individually I like about Oshi no Ko that I think it actually does do very well, and I just wish that those things were more in the forefront instead of Aqua's like super fucking cringe, like I'm fucking light with the Death Note, except I'm I'm in the Japanese entertainment industry.
Yes.
It's that shit fucking sucks. Like, I mean, we didn't even mention it, but like, I just want to give a brief shout out since this might be the last time we talk about Oshi no Ko in a bit. Like, I even liked like the bit they did with Memcho, the YouTuber who was in the Terrace House reality show.
Memcho, who is actually secretly the best character in the show, but
so like after like the show wraps up, right, like Memcho and Aqua are like talking, they're like walking home from the after party, right, and Memcho kind of gets into like, before I became a YouTuber, the thing I really wanted to do was be an idol, but for reasons asterisk it didn't work out, right. And long story short, Aqua recruits Memcho as an idol, and the reveal is like she's like 27 or something, 26.
Right. She's been saying she's like 20 or 21 or something, right? And she's actually like 26 or 27 or something.
Yeah, right? and by idol standards,
right? Yes, that's you
get where I'm getting at.
Great grandma and idol standards, yes.
And the reason for that is because it reveals like a thing that I think is actually very relatable. She had dreams of a creative endeavor. She had a passion she wanted to pursue, but the reality of her family situation meant that it was not economically viable, right? So she tells us she spent most of her teens and 20s like working, like employed, like
just surviving,
just to survive and support her family. And by the time that like things got financially stable enough that she could even consider that career path, she's already quote unquote past the expiration date, right? Like we are talking about an industry that literally like casts like middle school aged girls, right?
Yep.
Like we're talking about this type of industry, right? Where it's like, oh, you should be auditioning when you're 15. Like, the idea of you breaking into this industry at 25 is unthinkable. And the show actually does a pretty good job of getting into like, it's kind of fucked up that like there's this industry that just like, turns your youth into a commodity,
chews
and,
you up and spits you out.
Yeah. Exactly, right. And once you hit a certain age, you're old and busted.
Come to graduate.
But I mean,
right.
like,
and
that's all well and good. I also enjoyed that. That's also like the side story of the side character,
so,
right?
So that's what I mean, right? It's like this whole thing I just described lasted about as long as it took me to verbally describe it.
Yeah, it's about like 2 or 3 minutes
of
the episode.
When that sounds more interesting than what the show is. Almost.
That's the problem.
Is this a case of do not do this cool thing? Like,
yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And I think that is the thing about Oshi no Ko that constantly makes me feel very conflicted about it is there are these like flashes of brilliance that make me go, wow, okay, this show is actually on some shit. And then the rest of it happens.
Mm-hmm. And I just want to go back one more time to the show does not ever come back to what we had in the first episode.
Oh no, never.
Like that's just complete. It's not even trying. Like it's just a completely different. And like I was sold on like that level of like intensity.
Is that the Trojan horse? Like
like that level of like intensity and drama and like that's what really sucked me in. And even though that there are things that they do that are good, none of them are the things that I was interested in when I got hooked on the show in the very beginning. And
no, I mean, this is I'm beginning to like suspect that maybe this like hour-long debut thing that TV anime are starting to do
It's a bad idea.
is a bad idea because
I mean, maybe they should just make an hour-long OVA. Is what it sounds.
yeah,
like.
maybe. Honestly,
Yeah, I mean, so that combined with the fact that what the show did turn into is primarily this vehicle for Aqua, who I hate, is like, why am I doing this to myself? I mean, yeah, there are flashes of things that I like. I think when they do have their critiques of the industry, they find interesting ways to do that through real people, like it's not just like they're just like explaining, oh, and then this happens. Sometimes they do that, but most of the time it's like Memcho is the example of like, okay, well, this is a real person.
Here's a specific case study rather than just
how it affected them, and those are interesting. But again, those are like the side stories, right? Like the center story of Aqua and his quest to find the killer, and which hardly gets it. Like even that part of it doesn't even get screen time. It's mostly him just like trying to figure out how to outsmart everybody, and
I would
whatever.
prefer that,
But
honestly. Like at this point, I don't care about Aqua's acting career. Like I really fucking don't. Like I would almost prefer the version of this story where Ruby is gonna Gunbare her way to the top of idol stardom while Aqua turns into this fucking weird like fucking like
Vigilante,
anime detective or whatever. Because like,
I mean, that's the only time he's interesting is when they do emphasize him kind of being this creepy, weird, like obsessive, like, and very rarely happens. Very rarely. Like the only time I can remember really is like when they were talking about the cell phone flashback when he just sat there for years trying to crack the cell phone, right? Like that kind of stuff is the only kind of interesting aspect to his character. And like even in the final episode, Ruby's like, oh, when he's around Kana, he's like his old self again. And I'm like, but no, I don't want to be his old self. I want him to be the weird, like messed up dude that like, that's much more interesting to me, I guess. But I don't know. Like, it's all just not giving me what I thought we were getting. And I don't know. We'll see. I guess it's going to depend on what's going on the season that it comes back, because we don't know exactly when it's coming back, but there's other shows to watch. I don't know if I'm coming back. So,
okay.
All right. Let's talk one more time about Birdie Wing Golf Girl story.
it's time.
The first of two shows on this list that are about standing by your cancelled wife.
Man.
On paper, so I think there was only one episode left the last time we talked.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
On paper, I liked a lot of what they did. I like the fact that Eve got canceled.
It's very funny.
And that, like, literally years go by.
Yes. They cover a lot of ground in about 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird.
But it's just like, now that I've had time to think about it, I'm just kind of sad because, like, I feel like maybe
it's a bit of a wet fart of an ending.
Birdie Wing was never
Birdie Wing flew too close to the sun and burned up brightly.
Like the literal owie made of wax melting on the golf course.
That was
good. Too was Birdie Wing doomed to such a fate, I think.
It burned bright and burned out, and I'm kind of sad.
There are things about that like last episode that I still think are quite solid. Like, I will admit, like, I don't know why it never occurred to me that, the thing they would do is have one of them caddy for the other, but that still did catch me off guard for some reason.
It's not a bad twist.
The Eve getting canceled, of course, very funny. Just like, of course, like, eventually, like, the competitor would just be like, fuck, can I just find any dirt on this person to get them disqualified prematurely? Hey, we get one more shot of like Lily and her gunpla boxes, so it's all good in the hood in that regard. But
I will say that I have admiration that they did not like succumb to the obvious pressure and just do a bit where someone shoots a hole in one. They resisted the most obvious trope of golf shows.
And Eve doesn't win the tournament, right? Like,
Well, she wins,
Well,
but
she
gets
does.
cancelled.
Yes, I mean,
Oh, well,
it's
she
the
does,
very
but she gets-
it's the very
right.
hackneyed. She wins, but gets disqualified at the last second.
Yeah.
You know, hell, I even love that they finally bust out like what the fuck is the full name of it? You know, their love Tenkya, you know, like equivalent.
Shining bullet
Wings.
burst or like,
Yeah.
Yes.
like rainbow. I don't know, shining
It's so
rainbow
many
burst.
words strung together.
Yeah. He
But
takes
yeah.
everyone's golf, including her wife's, and
Uh-huh.
Yeah, right. It's and I, you know, yeah, I think on paper a lot of that stuff works well. I think it is the right thing to do in the last episode, but also I do agree that, like, you know, for example, the final golf lady,
She didn't do anything.
I really thought she'd have something like
Like her power was being boring. Like that was her.
yeah, her
being
power was
good at golf.
consistency.
Yeah.
which
Yes.
is like
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's just
you
not
could
that.
pull off the quote unquote normal consistency guy like in the middle of your like.
No, here's the thing.
Tournament,
It can
but-
work. It can work as the final boss, but you need to make every normal thing they do feel superhuman.
Right.
You know, like
She can't
You know-
just be consistent. She has to be consistently best at everything.
Her name was the
Yes.
lunar. They called her the Lunar Empress and did nothing.
Yeah.
with it.
right. Yeah, it's like I was
She
like
had
is she
ominous Bayonetta golf balls. Like,
Right, I was like, is she gonna get powered up by the full moon? Like, is that why she's so confident?
Yeah.
You know, she was like, "Don't worry, I'm gonna win on the third day." And I was like, "What? Is it because on the third day
on the full moon, when the full
Yeah.
moon rises, like
Are you
I-
a werewolf?
Yeah, when the full moon
no,
rises, my
no,
muscle
we'll-
strength increases by 1.3 times.
I mean, I was waiting for that, right? I
There's
think
rules
yeah, it's
that,
like.
that say a werewolf can't play golf.
But yeah, I think so. I think that is a thing, right? Like Birdie Wing, like embraced its like absurd, silly, like sports anime tropes, like down to the hilt, and I think maybe lost some of that manic energy by the finale here. And you know, I can still get a good laugh out of wacky sports tropes, but you know, I can get that elsewhere too, you know? Like
One of my favorite things was the like literally 5 years go by and they're all wearing the same clothes except Eve has shorter hair and like
yeah.
but
Well,
yeah.
I will say I did laugh quite heartily in the flash forward where Eve's like, I heard they cured your disease. It's like, yup, I'm all good.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, they cured right.
My
I felt-
golf.
I felt
The
bad for-
audacity.
I felt bad for Ichida, who's like left hanging for 3 years and has to like take
She's
a
just
job
caddying at a
caddying
course,
rich.
yeah.
Right.
Like I had to take a job slumming it, caddying for like rich nobodies,
making
and
probably
stuff.
making
Yeah.
you know hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah, well, it was fun while it lasted, I guess.
Yeah, you know,
it
like
just- another
Birdie Wing is
show-
one of those shows where, like, in spite of I think its relatively weak finish, like it cannot take away from
The highs were very high.
yes, you know, like the hypnotic titty sweat, the robot arms, you know, death golf, the transforming golf course.
Yep. The
All that
rainbow
stuff.
car escape.
Yes, it's
the
we'll always have those moments.
I do wonder if I just and like this is pure conspiracy theory, but I wonder if somebody higher up noticed and were like,
Oh,
"Rein
yeah.
it in, guys," because like Iro, you'll remember this, but like when Time Bakan 24 came back for a second season and was like suddenly awful and boring, and it was very much you guys just made a fucking comedy show without us noticing, but now it has to be a serious educational show, and it just sucked all the life out of it.
This is more common than you'd think. There's actually it's a fairly well established trend of an anime where like the first season is kind of more hands off, you know, like the higher ups have kind of just signed off on a show that sounds like, oh, okay, I get it. That'll do a certain amount of numbers, right? And they kind of just ignore it. And so it kind of gets away with like being more experimental or, you know, because there's so little like, you know, oversight. I mean, a great example of this, right, is the infamous, what was that show? Kimono
Friends, yeah.
Kimono Friends, right? Like, I mean, I never watched it, but my understanding is that people loved the first season. And then, like, season 2, didn't they literally fire the director?
Yeah,
like,
they really screwed the pooch on that one.
you know, and it's Yeah, I could see that. And I could see Birdie Wing almost screwed by the fact that it was delayed, right? Like, is the version of Birdie Wing that gets to air continuously, like, is it too late for the higher ups to stop that car, right?
Right.
But
And
with
again,
all those delays in between.
I've got no evidence for this.
Oh, of course,
at
yes.
all.
This is
This is like
this is pure conjecture.
speculation. But like it feels definitely like there was less of in the second season there was less of the deliberate, self-aware, like dumb humor.
They had to,
like, and I refuse to believe that they just like lost the ability to tell those jokes. I wonder if, interference or not. I wonder what the creative process was like behind the scenes.
They had to sell the video game, had to rein it into.
Yeah,
which I don't think we talked about this. I feel like maybe now's the time to mention it.
I think you talked about it.
No, I talked about I know I talked about the video game at length.
Yeah,
I was trying to look up because if you recall, I mentioned it was very weird to me that the game just like ends before you even like meet Vipera or anything. And apparently, this is.
Are they selling the rest of it as DLC or something?
No, apparently I couldn't get enough information to put all the puzzle pieces together. But the only trailer for the game officially is like for I forget which VR headset thing. It's not a Nintendo trailer, even though the game is on Nintendo Switch. And I don't know if there was like, it appears to me that they were supposed to be making some kind of VR game, and then maybe that got scrapped, and then they just sold whatever was left for the Nintendo Switch thing. Gotcha. But I don't know if you guys remember, there was also like a metaverse museum.
Yep, I remember that.
Yes, that was
like, yeah. I'm saying this all to say that, and this is a big stretch, but perhaps there is a lot of corporate meddling in this project. So maybe it would not surprise me if there was something to that effect.
Meant to be a like pointless tax boondoggle, but then people noticed it and they went, "Fuck."
Yeah, but people actually liked the first season. And it was like, no, we don't want people actually watching this. This is our tax haven, right? But I don't know. It just overall, I mean, putting all that stuff aside, it's just like they left so much on the table.
Yeah,
we could have had so much. More.
Like, I feel like we probably owe Aqua a minor apology here because...
No, we don't.
I wasn't on that one, so I don't have anything to say about that.
I'm still not going to go as hard as Aqua went. Like, he went real
he went real hard
on it. Because, like, I still, like... I still, like, I have no regrets watching it. But
yeah, I thought it was entertaining to the end. But yeah, like, there was definitely kind of like a... they did not peak... They sort of fell away, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, like I didn't necessarily disagree with Aqua's points. I just disagreed on the severity of of it, I guess. But it's a little disappointing. So I'm glad we gave the show its props last year. Let's put it that way, because I don't know how things are going to go this year, but we'll see. All right.
Well, time for another big one.
Yeah, let's talk about Heavenly Delusion, Tengoku, Daimakyo.
I think part of the problem here is that there's not really a great deal more to talk about than when we last talked about it.
Yeah, so
I mean, we only have the last episode since the last time.
Yeah,
but I mean, even by those standards, like,
I do. Yeah, I mean, there are some things I want to say about the series as a whole, but we did leave off.
That's kind of where I'm going with it.
Yeah. We did leave off on the last time. There was only one episode left, and we already talked about the big elephant in the room, which was our distaste for the creative choices made in the penultimate episode to bring in
and those choices are even more baffling considering the content of the last episode.
You can go back and check the tape, Iro. You predicted exactly what was going to happen in the last episode.
Turns out that
word for word.
You guys have watched anime before, and you know Japan's like the weird strain of morality that Japanese media loves to engage in.
I mean, screw Japanese media. That like media.
Like, kill him, like, right, just like him.
It's not like this trope isn't like super prevalent in Western literature as well.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the final episode's decision to have Maru basically come in full on, revenge, whatever, and then stopped at the last minute from killing, what's his name, Robin? Is it
Robin.
Quote unquote Robin.
And everything. It only reinforced what we were saying of like, it felt like such a lazy creative choice. That was,
And it's even more aggravating because, again, like, I think there is a good scene in this show where they're like sitting by the water, where they have a discussion of like how they feel about each other, and Kiriko's like, would you call it gender dysphoria? I'm not even sure, because there's obviously no real world analog to it. But I think that scene is good, but the problem is, to justify a scene of sexual assault, you should have like multiple episodes of scenes like this. And the fact that they have to, that since this is the last episode, everybody has to be happy and all
back on the
good
road.
to go, back on the road by the end of the episode, is just... Man, it's a real bad choice.
I think, yes. So, I was not here for the last podcast, but I did listen to your guys' discussion of, how Heavenly Delusion decides to kind of wind down its anime storyline, right? And the thing that is unfortunately I kind of knew from a mile away is that the last episode was not going to have a lot of closure, because unfortunately, the thing that's very like frustrating and in some ways mind-boggling about the creative decisions that happen here is like, so obviously this is not the first nor will it be the last time that Maru and Kiriko go through some like wild, upsetting experience and they go, wow, that was crazy. Anyways, let's get back on the road. I mean, this is literally how the Juichi arc ends, right? This is literally how the Dr. Usami arc ends, right? Like, obviously there's mental anguish, obviously there's emotional trials that they go through. They do not walk away unaffected, but at the end of the day, every arc sort of ends with, and we're back on the road.
I think the difference between those two is that, like, those are things that happen to
other people,
other characters, right?
Yes.
And it's like they have empathy for those characters, and we can extend our empathy to those characters, but like, they are sort of in a position where they can then move on and do something else.
Yes. And they don't have a choice but to walk away from the other ones.
Yeah,
right?
and also in the case of the Juichi arc, at least, they believe that is a happy ending they are walking away from.
Yes, true. So, and I think that is the really frustrating thing about this final arc is it is a much more personal conflict here, a much more like personally upsetting set of circumstances that are occurring here, and yet it is treated with the same narrative gravitas as the previous arcs.
I disagree. I think it's treated with way less narrative gravitas than the previous arcs.
Like, I mean, I guess. Like you could argue it's almost kind of strange and upset and frustrating how easily they seemingly walk away from this, right?
Yeah, like I said, I think that one scene is good, and I could do with a lot more scenes like that. But like the fact that they knew, and again, like, this is a criticism of the show, but mostly it's an indirect criticism of the source material, because one is indistinguishable from the other in terms of this problem, But it feels especially weird that they would like stretch to adapting that scenario when they knew they would not have time to like do it justice.
This is kind of why I kept saying I wish this anime was either 2 episodes shorter or 2 episodes longer.
Yeah, I quoted you on that one on the last episode.
It is as like I compared it to the first season of Made in Abyss, but in some regards it's even more frustrating than the first season of Made in Abyss, where at least that show does, even if you don't really end on a good place, there's a sense of emotional closure to the final episode.
Yeah, I mean, they resolve the thing,
a conflict. Yes,
yeah, and like in a sense, I think that like the thing about Made in Abyss is that although it is not a narratively satisfying ending, it is an emotionally satisfying ending.
And I think, and I guess the thing that like I will always wrangle with. I mean, this is why even as far back as when this first got an anime announced, I struggled with talking about this. Is that like, in spite of all this, I can't help it. There are things that I do like about this last episode. Again, like yes, they're Riverside conversation, but also, the academy stuff, right? Like where the kids kind of break out, and we kind of get this really, in a lot of ways, I get why they paced this episode like this. And so it kind of makes it unfortunate that only one half of it really works. Because in direct parallel to Maru and Kiriko's conversation, we get Shiro and Mimihime's conversation by the river, right? And it's very sincere, right? There's an undeniable warmth to like the way these two kids are talking to each other, right? Like Shiro,
I think what's frustrating is that this episode at the same time demonstrates how good the character stuff can be in this show, like how much care they have done to like build their characters into rounded, fully dimensional people. Like,
it's it's funny because like most of the show I was much more interested in Maru and Kiriko's story. And by the end, I felt like the ending of the academy stuff was so much stronger. Like, I felt like they actually found a good way to kind of close the loop of like, because to me, I feel like the show peaked on like the hospital arc or whatever we want to call that.
Yeah,
right?
hard to argue with that.
And having kind of showing how Mimihime and Shiro get out into the world, and we can kind of how much of that more of that story gets told in the future in the manga, I don't know, but at least from our end, we can kind of fill in. Okay, well, at least that loop is closed. We know that this is where it started, and we know where it ended. Right.
For what it's worth, the post credit stinger here does confirm that those segments take place in the past, relative to the Maru and Kiriko stuff.
We got a little bit like, at least we closed the loop, and then if they want to fill in the rest later, like that was a good way, I think, to do that.
Like, even just taking just the anime, like I'm not going to talk about anything that happens in the manga, just the storytelling that is shown in the anime. Yeah, they closed the loop on the Shiro Mimihime stuff like so unbelievably well in that last episode, because as Iro put together, and I think as the rest of you put together, right, that Dr. Usami and his ward Hoshio are what become of Shiro and Mimihime in the future.
Yeah,
that arc on its own is already pretty emotionally hard-hitting in a vacuum.
Yeah.
And then you get this stuff in the last episode, and like, as you say, you don't even need to know what happens to these kids going forward, but the bittersweetness...
You already know that these two crazy kids did not make it in this messed up world.
Are not going to make it in this messed up world.
They made it for a while.
And it sucks. It is heart-wrenching. Like, it is heart-wrenching that in your heart of hearts these kids aren't going to make it, and
they that's because like I think that, as you said, Joe, I mean, most of us have concentrated on the Maru and Kiriko stuff, but they've done a good job in the segments we have had in the academy, or whatever you want to call it. Like, they've done a good job of like endearing us to these characters. I don't think that they've done a super deep like dive on any of them as like complex personalities, but we know them enough to find them endearing or sympathetic or lovable.
Totally.
And that's what's necessary for the emotional punch here.
And so this is all to say, like, I think the frustrating thing with Heavenly Delusion is, I'm confident, like, saying at least, again, not spoiling anything about the manga, but like, going forward from here, the story doesn't lose these merits. These traits don't disappear. Right. It's just that you have to now forever live with the really baffling creative decisions it made halfway through its run.
Right. Was it Yurairo who said that, like, writing a sexual assault into your story should be like dropping a nuclear bomb?
That's this advice I received from romance authors.
Right. But like, it's very solid because, like, sexual assault is something which impacts a person's entire life. Like,
it's like, I don't remember if I had mentioned this on the previous podcast, but like around this time I was reading like Berserk for the first time, which heavily features sexual assault, but like also does treat it like an extremely intense and important thing that happens to people. And so then to have Heavenly Delusion and treat it with a relative glibness was kind of bizarre.
I think, and if I can, what I started thinking about was like, if again to go back to what I'm still calling the hospital arc, I don't know if there's a better name for it, but
we know what you mean.
That I felt like, I get I get thematically what the idea is. This show is called Heavenly Delusion. I think that if I'm interpreting the themes correctly, it's something to the effect of, whatever your concept of heaven it is probably not what you think it is or doesn't exist or whatever, and that perhaps heaven is the friends we made along the way, that kind of thing. And I think in that hospital scene, like, they found a way to push, like, they inched like just up to the border of misery porn. Like, a lot of bad stuff happens in there, right? But they handle it in a way that is like, I don't know, sympathetic and graceful enough to where you don't feel like, it doesn't feel exploitative, even though like it literally ends with like Shiro shooting himself in the head, right? Like, it's very dark and there's none of that with what happens to Kiriko at all. Like, it's just like,
it feels like what it is, which is a like bad cliched plot device.
Right, it's a cliche plot device to show, because Kiriko needs to learn that the past is not what you think it is, and you need to move on.
Yeah, like the people are not.
You need to move on to your new life, and they've picked like the most like just hacky way of doing
the
it,
bluntest, least subtle way to communicate that plot line.
And it's like, and it's just, we saw that you don't have. We saw that you know better.
Right.
We saw that you're capable of doing it better.
It's also frustrating because, like,
there's nothing
Robin,
here.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, there's nothing here that regular violence would not have accomplished.
Or you could find some other way to do it, right? This is
because here's the thing, right? We already know Robin is fucking shady as hell, right? Because of course we see what was in that behind that locked door he was trying to open when Maru was chasing him, right? Like, he kept like what appears to be a man-eater locked up in this facility.
Also,
like he's clearly up to bad shit. Like, there were other ways to show that Robin is a manipulative, exploitative person without just relying on like the most like cliches.
I will still claim that prior to this episode, I don't feel like that was telegraphed enough. But yes, once you start seeing the stuff in the facility, it's like, yeah, all right.
But also, like, we know he's a bad and manipulative person because this is that kind of story, and the show has so like unironically hero worshipped him up to this point that it would be more shocking if he weren't evil.
Right. So that goes back to what I was saying. Like, yes, that's the title of the show, right? Heavenly Delusion. Like, things are not.
But it's more kind of like, it's weird that this show that has been so good, like, it's even been fairly good about writing like Kiruko's, again, quote unquote, gender dysphoria, and I only call it that because obviously there is no real word for it.
There's a bunch of weird sci-fi stuff attached to it.
I apologize if that is not the correct phrase.
No,
but
I get you.
It's been like, it has done a gratifyingly like complex and relatable kind of series of scenes that sort of allude to that, so to speak, and then just to like have this ridiculous I have you now, my pretty shit, come along.
It was so bad. Like,
it's not only, and like, it's going to happen from the moment he comes in, because like he's wearing like the creeper smile that shows up in all anime. It just feels like they teleported in a segment from like a much worse, much shittier, much like more exploitative show, and it's such a hard swing, I think, is why it stands out so much.
Yeah,
it's so fucking weird because like I have talked about this with Iro a couple times, and I don't know if I brought it up in the podcast itself, but like, in terms of like the perception of a work and like how one feels about like a piece of media as a whole, like, can you still like love a work that like stays consistently good until it has one precipitous drop and then just incongruously returns back to the baseline level of quality that you were familiar with? Because like, this is the fucked up thing about Heavenly Delusion. Speaking about what I know about it going forward from here, it just becomes what you know Heavenly Delusion to be again after this. And
Right.
like it's
That's
not like
that's
this
like the
signals
weird part, right?
like this moment does not signal the quote unquote fall from grace of Heavenly Delusion. This signals the like you stepped into a rake once so hard it broke your nose and knocked out 6 teeth,
Right.
but then you just kept on walking.
And I
And that's
think
the
I
yeah,
think that would not be a problem if this were just bad. But it's not. It's bad and it's like morally repugnant.
That's the thing
Right.
that's tough. Like that's the thing that like makes it really
Right.
tough because like the thing is like if they ever announced a season 2 of Heavenly Delusion, it has that hypothetical season 2 would have a lot of the things you guys liked about this show up until episode 9.
I still
you
think
know?
the show is pretty good overall. Like,
Yeah, like
and,
it's
and
that is
you know to kind of steer it back towards like discussion about the final episode. Like,
yes.
part of the problem is that because they do not close this plotline, is that ultimately we are rehashing it again.
And that is
you know?
also right. Like this is the other issue with anime as a medium, right?
Yeah.
Is when I was reading this stuff in the manga, I was really upset. I was like, "Oh my fucking god, I can't believe it!" And then I was like, "Well, tune in for the next chapter next month, right?" And it's like, I'm not gonna say like the next chapter gave me closure, but like the nature of like manga as a medium means that like
Kind
as
of just
time
move
goes on,
yeah.
as time goes on, it becomes smaller in the rearview mirror. You know what I mean?
There is
Whereas, like, the
always
way-
another chapter coming.
Whereas the way anime is paced out,
This will
you
always
just have
be
to sit with this for
this
like
is the last thing we're ever going to remember about Heavenly
right,
Delusion, right?
like
Yeah.
like generously 6 to 9 months. You know,
Right.
if
like,
they make
and-
another season,
if-
right?
yeah.
Like,
if they do
I mean, it
And-
could be years, it could be forever. You know, but-
right, and
And
Ugh,
the thing
yeah,
is,
it's-
they had I think that this should be the last thing we have to say about it because I think we're all fairly clear on it. But this last episode had a chance to be a mitigating factor on that, and it isn't. In fact, it's arguably an amplifying factor, and that's a shame because the show is good and it's occasionally been great, and I still think it is a strong contender for anime of the year. You know, we'll see when we get to that, but the fact that it has so obviously like seen like you said, saw the rake lying on the ground and go, let's jump with both feet onto this
Yeah.
is like immensely frustrating.
Yeah.
yeah,
yep.
Yeah, it's you know, the ending is important, which I think is going to lead us into our final show to discuss here. Let's talk about Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury.
I feel like this is pretty much going to be me and G sitting on opposite fences and you two in the middle trying to talk us down.
I mean,
Look.
do you guys really feel that differently about it? I mean,
these two crazy kids made it in this messed
Okay,
up world.
okay, yeah.
That's all
So-
that matters.
okay,
That's
so all right. Before we get into any debates here, I think
Yeah.
we all agree the show needed more time. That's what we've been
Yes,
saying
yes.
this
I
whole
mean,
time.
Of course, like
I feel like this is like the most obvious.
Yeah, and we've been saying this
I-
whole time. I don't think we really need to get back into that,
No.
but yes, that is the one thing we definitely all agree on is
like I guess the if there is a debate to be had here, like the core of it is essentially, and I get into this in my final thoughts post that I've written on theglorioblog.com,
And you should read
that-
it. It's very good.
that we all agree the show needed more time. I think where we fall is like how much more does it benefit from that additional, or how much did it lose from not having more time, I think is probably the better way
Right.
to think about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I guess we might as well talk about the ending first before we talk about our overall thoughts.
Yeah, I
Soleta
mean-
Miorine press the stop war button.
Caliban gets a sick upgrade but doesn't actually get
Yeah.
to fight.
Yeah.
Uh,
The Z wave goes across the universe and Rita
Mhm.
Repulsion
Oh my
and
God.
Zordon are
Yeah,
made
yeah.
good.
the Gundams get together and shoot their gay rainbow waves. at the bad
Gundam
guys,
Caliban
and-
activates. Yeah, Gundam Caliban activates the Moonlight Butterfly, and then in brackets, gay.
Yes.
Oh come on, the original Moonlight Butterfly is pretty gay.
It's just.
Sure.
Miorine and Eri get cool new pocket pals. They have the best Tamagotchi in the world.
Yes.
Prosper
Yeah.
ages 25
They get
years
net
in the
navi,
space of
yeah.
a couple of months.
I guess, yeah, I guess, you know, if we want to get into, like, the specifics of this ending, right, like, it is essentially... it is the show making a lot of it is making an effort to try to close up as many of these plot lines as it can. We have Suletta and Murine's relationship finally, like them, recognizing their affections for each other. It is Suletta confronting Lady Prospera about, her mission of revenge. It is Prospera being confronted by the literal ghosts of her past about, where this journey has this journey since the prologue has taken her. It is about God, it's about so many things.
We get the Shadiq takes the fall somehow to protect all the others, which shows he wasn't such a bad guy overall, despite the fact that he commanded his squad to massacre a bunch of school children.
Cecilia Dote becomes Cecilia Dote brackets business version.
Yes. It turns out the kid with the harrow didn't have a dark secret after all, and also he might be going out with Choo Choo now.
Well, we'll see about that.
Or wasn't it? And we got harrows with guns.
Yes. We gave a harrow a gun, upgrading the G Witch harrow to now the most dangerous harrow in the Gundam franchise. I think. Well, maybe short of the harrow that helps Uso pilot the V2 in Victory, but.
Okay,
does a co-pilot count? Does the co-pilot also get the kill count of the pilot?
Okay, so can I lay out my case first?
Okay.
All right.
So quite a lot of this finale made me go, this is kind of like the end of Gundam Unicorn. Which is about the deadliest insult you can possibly
I know, I
give to
cannot
anything.
I could barely stand for this.
So look,
you'll have to explain for those of us who don't know what the ending of Gundam Unicorn is, but yes.
The Gundam shoots rainbows and space magic fixes everything. And look, I know despite the fact that Gundam is the archetypical real robot series, there has always been an element of space magic in it.
Axis shock.
But this is, that's different for reasons I won't go into, but this really does kind of feel like they pressed the stop war button and everything was fixed automatically. I think part of this, part of my dissatisfaction with this ending is stuff that has been brewing for a while, and part of it is creative decisions they make on the bounce. I think the stuff that has been brewing for a while is just that the Space Union Guild, whatever those dudes are, just kind of came out of nowhere and aren't remotely satisfying as a final boss. I think that we know nothing about them. We have barely any grasp of what their motivation is here. They're basically just a plot device to get everybody to team up to fight off. I think that there is not enough consequence in a lot of this ending. We don't Prospera gives up, and we don't really know why. Why does she stop her evil plan? She just kind of does.
She loves her daughter.
The argument I see being made for Prospera's actions, right, is that
she's also kind of beaten at this point too, right?
Well, it's also there is an undercurrent.
Her actions suggest a woman who would stop when she knows she is beaten.
No, but okay. So the argument I've heard about Prospera's actions in the finale is that one of the things that, again, the show would have really benefited if they had spent more time on it is that if Prospera simply wanted to kill Delling, she had him dead to rights multiple times in the show.
Yeah, and
the reason she doesn't pull the trigger is because Prospera does not want to kill Delling. That would be very nice. What Prospera truly wants is the complete and absolute dismantling of the Benerit group, right?
No, that's not what she wants either. She wants the data storm to extend.
Well, yes, that too. Yes, of course.
But the point is, the dismantling of the Benerit group is only because that is the only way that this thing will be allowed to exist.
Right.
And the thing is, she's kind of a non-factor in this ending. She's kind of completely irrelevant to what happens. And there's a way you can do that deliberately and make it a statement on her character. But I don't think this is deliberate. I think she just she just sort of disappears from the plot. Also, she should be in jail. Come on, she should absolutely be in jail.
She did get off pretty clean for the amount of war crimes she committed. But
she deserves to see her children's grandkids.
Does she? She's killed a lot of people, including her own daughter, like 6 or 7 times over.
All right, so here's the thing: like everything you've thrown at G-Witch is largely valid, Zig. In fact, I recognize, and I write about this in my post, that, yeah, dude, the structural integrity of this ending is fractured at best.
And you know, I'm being a bit facetious, but
yes,
for effect. But you get where I'm coming from.
But here's the thing: like, you compare, Witch from Mercury to Unicorn. The real reason Unicorn falls apart isn't. I mean, it is the space magic, but arguably it isn't the space magic.
Yes,
what makes Unicorn fall apart is its complete, like, cardboard cutout of a main character with a completely hollow ideology and a core thesis.
We cannot litigate Unicorn again.
No, I'm not here to... Look, no, I'm not here to litigate Unicorn, but I'm here to bring up the failures of Unicorn and why I don't think that they apply to G-Witch in quite the same way. Is that, like, Unicorn is an emotionally hollow story.
Yes, absolutely. Like, and I will say that my comparison was mostly, like, mechanical and visual.
Yes, and those I totally recognize. And I think the reason why Witch from Mercury, at least for me, like, broadly, scores in the positive, right? It clears the bar for me. It becomes the rare Gundam I can say I like. Is there an asterisk attached to that? Of course. There's an asterisk attached to almost every Gundam I like. But it still ends up being one of those because of the strength of that emotional core, right? Like, I agree, the ending has a lot of structural issues to it, but also, I think the show really never loses sight of the thing that anchors it, which is Suleta and Miorine. And I think, like, throughout the whole run, the show, for better or worse, makes the choice to jettison a lot of this stuff to make sure that core piece of the narrative kind of holds it together, to the finale.
And I think you're absolutely right about that, and I furthermore think that is the correct creative decision under these restrictions.
Like, I think obviously the real answer is Ichiro Okochi should have written a story that could fit in 24 episodes. Like, of course, I think that
yeah,
that is probably the thing he should have actually done.
Yeah, because there's
world.
I just want to tack onto that point real quick. Like, I do think this story could have been told in 24 episodes. There's a lot of things that probably could have been trimmed down.
Yes.
Like all the, like, different factions and everything. Like give me a good guy and a bad guy, and we're good on that.
As effective as it was, I might have cut all the stuff on Earth. Like,
I would have at least. I mean, I would have cut out, like, Pale and Grassley as factions altogether. Like, fold. Like, if you want to keep Shaddiq around, just fold him into the Banera group as a whole. Like the intercorporate stuff just does not hold up in the long run.
I still think it would have been better expanded with more episodes. But I think, like you said, if the plan was that you could have planned it out to fit into 24 episodes better.
Yes, but I think in the world where you don't, where Okochi chooses not to. I like the things he decides to focus on, like here's the thing. I don't really have, like, a good rational, like, these are the bullet points that explain why G-Witch is good, actually. It's more just the emotional feeling I get from watching it.
I think that's also absolutely true. I think I like this show a lot more than, like, disproportionate compared to its, quote unquote objective quality. Like, it is a very likable show. It has great characters. It has fun goofs. It is a really, really lovable show, and that is more important than any.
Right. And the thing I want to, like, bring up, like, that I have thought about it over the last week. Of, like, why do I give Witch from Mercury such a generous reading? Because here's the thing. There's a lot of bad Gundams out there where if you gave them a generous reading, would actually come out looking pretty solid. There are people out there who unironically love Iron-Blooded Orphans. There are people out there who think that unironically it tells a very compelling story about, like, child warfare and working class struggle and legacies of like how technology impacts legacies. I think
understand
these people
why
are wrong.
I understand why they would say that, but I think they're wrong.
Yes, I think they're insane, but I get where it comes from. And
Yeah.
I thought, wait, am I becoming that person for G-Witch? And I think the reason why I find my stance on this show more reasonable is that I think with its limited screen time, I think The Witch from Mercury does like a way better job in the fleeting scenes it does have of talking about the like higher minded stuff that I've come to love about Gundam.
Now this is an interesting point of comparison, because actually I think one of my issues with the show is that it doesn't really, like, one of my issues with it is that it doesn't really do enough of that. I don't think that it has like a strong moral or like what's the word? I can't, but like
Thematic,
I don't thematic, something like that, but I don't think that it is high-minded enough some of the time.
So I
Maybe,
would
but
yeah, I would probably agree with Zig on like the bigger concepts, but I would probably agree with G on the like the relationship stuff. I wanted to mention to that point. So there, I don't know if you saw, G, there was a comment on your post, and I'm
Yes.
not calling this person out. This was a perfectly valid point, but they said something to the effect of, even the stuff with, Suleta and Miorine did not get a lot of screen time, and they didn't feel like that was even fleshed out enough, and they kind of disagree with that point. And that got me thinking, because I didn't agree, but also that is correct. It doesn't get a lot of screen time, and I'm like, I was thinking about it, and I feel like, yes, we don't see them talking on screen a lot, but I feel like the moments we get are like big enough tent poles where
I think they're very well done.
Can fill in our brain can kind of fill in the rest. Like obviously they talk.
The show relies quite heavily upon, we will establish this thing, and
you got to kind of work a little bit, right?
Yes,
you got to fill in.
We'll establish this thing, and we'll wink at you, and we'll say, "Look, we don't have time, and you're going to have to look at these pieces, and yes, use your brain to fill in the rest, because we don't have, like, we're not going to be able to show you these things."
Mhm.
And I don't know if I necessarily like that all the time, but I understand it.
It might not be the best way to do it, but I that's kind of the best explanation I could think of as to why it still kind of worked for me.
Okay, so I guess this actually if we can maybe like that is a good example actually of like what I'm talking about. I guess more on the relationship angle than necessarily the world building of. I think like Witch from Mercury had to rely on very economic storytelling to cross the finish line. And I think the reason why I give that more generous reading is I think broadly this show does a better job of rewarding you putting those pieces together on your own than a lot of past Gundams have. Again, like, just to compare it to its predecessor, the previous alternate universe, which is Iron-Blooded Orphans. I think that, like, the moments in which Suleta and Miorine get to talk to each other and, like, hash out their relationship and what they mean to each other, is the screen time fairly limited? Yes. Like, is there not as much texture in there as I think any of us would have preferred? Obviously so. But I think when they are on screen and when they are talking, the show is making the best usage out of that time. And I say that because I want to compare it to like what is meant to be the core relationship of Iron-Blooded Orphans, which is between Mikazuki and Orga, right? Like, just as a quick recap, Orga is sort of the older brother figure to Mika, who is the Gundam pilot in Iron-Blooded Orphans, who is a traumatized child soldier. And this idea is that, like, despite whatever darkness these two may go on their journey in the show, that they are, like, bonded. They are soulmates, right? They trust in each other implicitly.
Right. But the show never really got into that.
It doesn't.
I feel like I spent the whole run of that show saying, when are they going to like dive into this relationship? And
they
the
never
most
do.
The most you get is like a quick flashback of they were being mugged in an alley or something and killed the guy, and then both decided to take on the world or something. But
Yeah, and it's like that's a show that had more than double the runtime of Witch from Mercury, and can't even like put together a single compelling relationship across its entire 50 episodes. And so I think it's for that reason that I do give Witch from Mercury a lot of rope, because knowing it doesn't even have half that time, it still did like it still did things that were so much more emotionally resonant.
Right.
And so even if, like, yes, it is standing on shaky ground, like, yes, the beams are barely holding the ceiling up.
Yeah, and
it does it. And it does it so well, at least to me,
Yeah.
that I do want to give it, you know, I can't help but forgive it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think, you know, sort of taking a big picture approach, I think, you know, Witch from Mercury is perhaps, I think it reflects the greater trend in both Gundam itself, but also in anime in general, towards more character-focused, empathic storytelling, you know, because, like, I think, you know, the great and the good of Gundam in the past have been very ideas-focused shows, you know, even, like, you know, I love Amuro and Char and Noah and all of those guys, you know, but sometimes those characters are more ideas than people,
Yes.
if that makes sense. And, you know, I think the tradition of Gundam has been to sacrifice individual characterization for a greater scope of message or idea, or to kind of convey the overall theme. And I think, and don't take this as a pejorative because it's not meant to be, but Witch from Mercury is more of a touchy-feely Gundam show, if you know what I mean. It is a show that is focused more on characters, on the individual quirks of those characters, on the humor and the drama and the inherent sort of humanity of those characters. But that does mean that you get less of kind of like the very kind of like high-minded space opera stuff, and that's always going to be a balance, right? You have to, you know, you are trading in some of one thing for some of another thing. I mean, the joke is always that, like, in some of the best known Gundam series and scenes, right, that the people do not actually act like people, right? They act like completely incoherent messes. And I think the people here are much more human, but you know, the sacrifice is perhaps that they are not pieces on a chessboard in the way that some classic Gundam shows treat their characters as. Does that make sense?
No, I get it. And this is why, like, it does not surprise me that, you know, the reception to The Witch from Mercury has been, like, I mean, undeniably popular, for sure. Like, I mean, you only need to, like, look at the ways people talk about the show to know it's doing well. But also, there is an equally loud dissenting voice in that room, right? There are I mean, look, let me, before I get into this, let me be clear. I am shunting out the entirety of the bad faith arguments here, right?
Yeah.
I'm cutting out the female protagonist, woke Gundam, gay marriage,
all
blah,
that
blah,
shit.
blah. All those people do not even deserve a voice in this room.
Yeah.
Like,
But
even ignoring them, there are valid criticisms of the show.
Yeah.
There are people who are like, this is barely a Gundam, you know? And to them, you know, if you have been a fan of this franchise for as long as some of us have, I do get where that emotional reaction comes from.
But also Gundam has been so many different things already, right?
Exactly.
Like, it was always, like, Gundam was always an
Toy
umbrella
commercial.
for a lot of different ideas. You know, I think you know, not to kind of just rehash my point, but I think the thing which strikes me, and my major critique of The Witch of Mercury, is that it doesn't necessarily feel like it has an overriding theme or idea, you know, and I think well, yeah, give me a second, you can respond in a second, you know, but I think, you know, to me that gives it a little bit less identity. Like, you know, if you think about the classic Gundams, you know, like original Mobile Suit Gundam is about, you know, how popular movements can be co-opted into space fascism and the danger of personality cults. Zeta Gundam is about how heroes can become villains and villains can become heroes. Gundam Wing is about how many bad things can these 4 boys say before we realize they're bad people. 5. But
5, yes.
Joking aside,
Yes.
I think that I think that I think that the most enduring theme I get from Witch from Mercury is love conquers all, and I think that's I think that again that is a more modern, more emotional.
It's very soft compared to the sort of theses Gundam has put together. In the past.
I think that there is definitely an argument that the old style Gundam show was very cold and aloof and kind of viewed the conflict from 1,000 miles above. Sort of the story was a dispassionate god who wiped pieces off the board, and
God's name Yoshiyuki Tomino.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think there was an appeal to that, and to me at least, I think some of that, I found some of that appealing. And to me, if I am making a critique of Witch from Mercury, I think that it perhaps lacks a little of that big picture storytelling.
I think that is fair. I'm not even looking to argue this. I will push back. Just this is a more agree to disagree thing. But I think Witch from Mercury does have a pretty strong central conceit, which is, and unfortunately, it is kind of just as soft as Love Conquers All, but I think it is important to recognize that I think the main thesis of The Witch from Mercury is about children inheriting the sins of their fathers, right, or their predecessors. In this case,
and I mean,
right?
there's
the
an
struggle
argument
to escape that cycle of revengeance, and
there's an argument to be made that is the core Gundam theme, which extends from the very first show through everything which comes afterwards, right?
Totally. And because I think a lot of Witch from Mercury, obviously it is about the core of Suletta and Miorine. Again, Love Conquers All is probably the core idea there, but I think a lot of that is tied into the generational trauma that I think Witch from Mercury is primarily concerned with, right? We talk about Suletta and Miorine, but there's also Guel, of course, right? Almost all of the primary characters in The Witch from Mercury are people dealing with the expectations and the consequences of the actions of their family, of their parents specifically, and sort of that struggle to escape that orbit. And again, you're right. That is not as hard hitting. That is not as clinical as what Gundam has said in the past about ideology and technology. But I think again, that stuff works really well on an emotional level. It makes me really happy to see Guel become the man he is by the end of that story. Again, it's very surface level, but again, I'm really happy that Suletta and Miorine made it. I was so ready for this show to go full dead lesbians. I was so the moment Suletta gets into Caliban and they're like, oh, this Gundam might kill you. I was like, oh my god,
obviously we're never gonna kill her.
Oh, I don't know. Gundam's fine killing its protagonists sometimes. So
if it were a different show than and I mean this is sort of drifting back into the argument I was making about perhaps there is not the frisson of danger there, but I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think that this show has been particularly good at conveying kind of the kind of weird, dangerous indoctrination children can inherit from their parents. If you say so, Mum, it must be correct, and stuff like that. And perhaps aside from Wow Cool Robot War is bad, we now need kind of a space opera to human opera chart.
Maybe.
And I think and again, we are mostly arguing semantics here.
Yes.
I certainly did not think I thought that the last episode was pretty bad, to be honest, and clearly you didn't, but I think our overall opinion of the show is fairly high.
I would just say for the last episode, I would probably agree that it's bad, but it's not the last episode's fault. That's kind of all they could do.
Right. I mean, the problems the chickens come home to roost.
Right. The problems were happening way before the last episode. Right. So, what actually happened in the last episode was kind of the only thing they could do to get to the conclusion, right? Yeah. So
They had time to give Calbarn a big power up, and not enough time to show it off.
Right.
You got to sell those
God.
kits, man.
I cannot believe I pre-ordered that fucking Gundam, and it doesn't even do shit in the last
It works.
episode.
It works.
Yeah, of course it worked.
Wow, cool.
I pre-ordered Short Set, and that thing's piloted by Lauda.
Yeah,
that
did.
does suck.
That
But
does
it is
suck.
the coolest robot in that whole show.
I still like Shadik's weird freezer bot.
Like-
I think that
Like
thing's cool.
somebody it didn't click for me until people started buying the high grade Short Set and like kit bashing it. The Short Set is Witch from Mercury's version of the new Gundam. It even has the asymmetric wing funnels.
Asymmetric, fin funnels.
Oh man, it's such a okay.
Yes,
Anyways,
all right. The robots are cool. We get it.
Yeah.
Point being,
Well, I think, all said and done, I'm just going to come back to a point I made early on in the run, which I think is kind of ties into what you guys were saying. Like, putting the criticisms aside, this feels like the Gundam people would want in 2023. Like,
Yes.
this is the and if that pisses off some old Gundam fans, so be it, I
whatever.
guess we're in
Those
2023
guys don't
now.
deserve opinions.
And I think that, is reflected in how popular it's been with everybody, not just, the people who are normally watching Gundam, which is not to say that Gundam is some obscure franchise that people don't watch, but people who are normally outside of the people, even myself, I don't normally watch Gundam.
Yeah.
Aqua doesn't normally watch Gundam. We all watched it, this one, because it has, it feels like a Gundam of the times.
Yeah,
and
it feels like a modern Gundam for the modern age.
There was an undeniable appeal to this that I think I'm fine saying no other Gundam has managed to pull off to the same degree. And I think that is worth recognizing. And we already did our sunrise corporate speculation minute with Birdie Wing, but I think there's, so the byline I write for my post for The Witch from Mercury is that I think that The Witch from Mercury is going to haunt me for years. And the reason I say that is because I think I am going to be haunted forever by the what ifs of what happened to the production of this show. Did it only get 24 episodes because Sunrise was oh, it's the girl Gundam. We can't.
I was thinking that
we can't
too.
Bank on that.
Of all people, is Ichiro Kochi the woke ally that we've been waiting for here? I don't know.
You can't say that after what has happened.
On the other hand,
Cable
that was
Kun
20
is right there.
That was 20 years ago. Maybe he's grown as a person.
Mio Rine and Suletta got the rings. All right.
Yeah, they unambiguously got married.
Married.
That is way more than we've gotten from 99% of other.
Does the Space League recognize the marriages in space territories?
It's
but
look,
if they cross the border, are they going to get arrested?
the higher ups at Bandai cannot if they are anything other than thrilled by how well this show has done, they are insane because it is,
they probably are now, but I think to G's point, prior to the show coming out, was there some discussion of nobody's going to like the show, we're only giving it 2 seasons,
absolutely.
Right? And I feel like that's totally a valid
I mean,
guess,
put it this way, I think that there is a fairly high chance this could be the first show to have a direct sequel season since Double O, which was 15 years ago now. So
I would love it. I mean,
I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but I did find it very funny that the end of the very final card of the show is that's the end of the story, folks. There's nothing else happening.
I've definitely seen some criticism that wow, Okochi did not leave a single way out of this ending.
Yeah,
you really closed the book as definitively as you could.
Man, there is always one way out of these endings.
Oh, that you could totally. Yeah, I mean that means nothing.
Aliens,
right? But it's just.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say.
Gundam Age is back.
Gundam sucks, man.
Gundam is terrible.
Well, at the end of the day, so yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the important thing is those crazy kids made it. They
Yeah.
got together, and I, you know, maybe it's just me, but like it was hard for me to be mad at anything else when that's the last thing we see of the show.
Right. I
And
mean,
it's
like
just,
It was a very soft cliche ending, but I'm
Sure,
kind of
but
okay with that. And
you know what? Let the lesbians win for once.
Yeah, you know, Eri becoming a sassy sister-in-law
Annette
and a
Navy,
keychain is very funny to me.
Yes,
Emotionally. I mean, again, I totally recognize that. Like, rationally, do I have a lot of great like rational defenses of Gundam Wish for Mercury? I don't know, but this is like the first Gundam I have watched in literally years that made me feel good being a Gundam fan. And if you're not a Gundam fan, I don't think you quite understand how rare of a feeling that is for Gundam fans. Gundam fans are miserable.
It was very
years.
I certainly recall post around when it started by the person who ended up making the I hope these two crazy kids making this Mr. World meme. They started watching it and they were like, wow, it sure is nice not being a Gundam fan and just being able to enjoy this show on its own merits and not constantly be worrying about the
40
baggage
years of history.
The franchise.
I will say that's part of
worried. I'm having a great time.
You know, as I will say, as the person with the least amount of Gundam experience on this podcast right now, like, yeah, I think that helped a lot for me. Like, I didn't have the emotional baggage of like, oh, well, this is that type of character, and they're going to do this or whatever.
Okay,
it still left me with a lot of like things that I thought were problems, but I still have problems with it.
I will counter that by saying that you did not know the true raw fear inside you when that Harrow with a gun showed up.
That's true. I just thought that was hilarious. Yeah. I just thought that was hilarious. Oh, silly yellow smiley face with gun. Smiley emoji with gun is funny. Yeah.
Good show.
So, yeah. So I'm kind of in the same place with Gio. It's like there's a lot of things in my brain is telling me that are wrong with the show, but like in my heart, like I felt good at the end.
It's very lovable. You want to like it, and I do like it.
Yeah.
My only critique: they should have let Choo Choo kill.
We can pretend that happened off screen.
You know, I would not be surprised if Choo Choo did kill someone off screen at some point.
She got an upgrade and didn't get to do anything.
The spoiler is that Choo Choo killed someone before the show ever started.
Oh, yes, exactly. Right. Yes, Choo Choo already has a record.
She killed the original Choo Choo and took her place.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
You know she's lured some dude into an airlock and then flushed it. Like,
oh god.
Yeah,
but
she just got to be the Choo Choo rocket at the end.
It's. At the end of the day, I'm still going to relish these feelings because they are rare for us Gundam fans. I mean, I'm already looking at the future of this franchise, and I can feel the hater returning. Gundam Seed is coming back. MS Igloo is coming back. I have so many reasons to become a hater again.
Come on, man.
All right, this is going to be a very naive and stupid statement to say, but you know, those are things I'm assuming were already in the works prior to this happening.
Yes.
You know, is there going to be some lesson learned where, this was very popular, maybe we should copy some of the good things from...
So,
no, that's not going to happen, is it?
If we want to go more top-down view on Gundam as a franchise, just quickly, the thing I would say is Gundam is a sort of slow-acting franchise because it is such a giant franchise that they plan these things out years in advance.
Right. I mean, it'll be
like
years
the Gundam Seed movie has been in production for nearly 10 years. Anything, Hathaway is currently in production. They just wrapped up the production of the G-Reco movies. There's a new Gundam Build series coming out. Like, this franchise is so gargantuan that, like,
we won't see any
live action shit.
Yeah.
Right. Like, if we see any impact from Witch for Mercury, it will happen at bare minimum 3 to 4 years. Like,
right.
And I do think I will say again, the famous last words. Even the money grubbers at Bandai must be paying some attention.
Yeah, they had record profits,
and that will likely influence their decision making to some degree.
Yep.
Like, will we
But
actually, at bare minimum, would we get another Gundam with another female protagonist? Like,
No, I know exactly what's going to happen. Next Gundam show, everyone is a lesbian.
Oh, you mean Cross Edge?
Wing, like, what? Just like Wing 2, like...
Just gender bend Gundam Wing. It's now 5 problematic women instead of 5 problematic boys.
Okay, actually,
Wait, now hold on. I think we got a formula.
We might be onto something with that one. Well, all right. I think we need to end this since we somehow managed to mention Cross Ange. I think that's enough to know that it's time to stop. That's gonna put a cap on the season, unless anybody else has anything else to say at this point. But I think we covered it.
It's been a pretty good one.
Overall, pretty good. Even like I said, even though we got a little dicey towards the end there, I'm gonna fondly miss the season next season. But more on that next time. Let's wrap things up with our housekeeping. Check us out at theglorioblog.com. Right now, we are putting all of our written first looks up for the new season. Also, check out G's final thoughts on the Witch from Mercury, as we mentioned. But new posts are currently coming out for the new shows, and spoiler, they're not great. I kind of like the Masterful Cat is Depressed one a little bit, but I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel, just as a preview. But we'll see. There's still more shows coming out. So check those out. You can follow us on Twitter at the GLORIO blog. Still somehow, where Twitter still exists. And on co-host at GLORIO. I am holding off on signing us up for whatever that fake Facebook Twitter one is.
Threads. Okay.
Threads, yes. The Blue Sky, I think you need an invite, right? I don't know. Whatever. I'm gonna let them all fight it out before we jump ship to another one. But,
okay, so what if we had 5 problematic social networks?
Yeah, right. Yeah, each one with their own problems. But yeah, and you can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon Music, Podbean, Stitcher, and of course YouTube, where you can like, comment, subscribe, ring that notification bell, all those good things. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. And we'll catch everybody next time.
Prosper should be in jail.